Well, thanks, James, for joining us here today. We have James Wang, the Vice President of Athlete Marketing from Priority Sports and the head of NIL at Priority Sports. James, thanks for taking the time for joining us today.
Appreciate it, Sean. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
James, can you talk about what questions student athletes should ask agents in the interview process with that provider?
Yeah, certainly there are the obvious and pretty simple ones that you just have to know. And maybe this is stuff that you can do in background research, but who else do you represent? Who else, what other college athletes do you represent? Do you represent anyone at my school? How much commission do you charge? How many years of experience have you been doing this? What are your past deals, right? Like, this is very surface level stuff. I would say as you dig into it further and certainly continue to explore with more agents, spend more time with them. Some of the other questions that would be good to know are also, kind of process driven and getting to know their process, right? How do you get to know me the best way you possibly can? How do you sell brands? What is your process in doing that? Right? What are some strategies that you execute to get to decision makers? My long-term marketing career, right? If I have professional aspirations, isn't compromised with things that I'm doing now. How do you make sure NIL deals aren't getting in the way of, my sport and what I do best, right? Which is a big driver for, why I'm getting NIL deals in the first place. So certainly the number of questions you can ask run the gamut, but they range from, very simple to really drilling down.
That's great. Yeah, and in the same vein there, James, as you put your shoes in, or you put yourself in the shoes of a freshman in college or a sophomore in college that's starting their NIL journey, along with what questions they should ask an agent, what qualities should they look for in a marketing representative or an agent as they're starting out?
What's interesting is it's what you should be looking for versus like what actually gets agents hired. I think in general there's a big difference there. I think if my kid was going through the process or I was, a parent kind of leading the charge on hiring an agent, I would first want to know again that, the person I'm hiring is super experienced. They know exactly what they're doing. They have all the legal support within their agency, even if they're not a lawyer. They have a long-term outlook, right? And they have the reputation and relationships in the industry to really help me maximize or help my kid maximize. A lot of times too, like your agent is responsible for really telling your story, right? And so I think a really important quality that I think a lot of our clients and the reason why they choose us is, they see us as a reflection of them, right? There's just a natural personality match, personality like kind of like a vibe check, right? That like um you know they feel like we can best represent them and best tell their story because we understand them the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's great insight there. And as an athlete goes through that experience, after they sign with an agent or with an agency, what types of services can that student athlete expect from that agency?
I'd say our main role for as NIL agents is to procure marketing deals, right? Whether they're cash deals or even trade deals, right? We can trade on marketing services, i.e., production time, social media posts, interviews, certainly appearances or anything that, runs a gamut, right? In terms of what we could trade. As far as, compensation goes, that can be in the form of cash or product. The good, the more experienced agents and the ones that make them themselves super valuable are the ones that ultimately like connect the dots, right? Just ultimately make their clients' lives easier in a lot of different ways, right? And I know our agency, there's a huge emphasis on client service, right? And for all of our NIL athletes, we treat them no differently than professional athletes. So, whether it's you need help, moving apartments or you need help negotiating a better car deal at the local dealership, right? From a client service perspective, we just aim to make our clients' lives easier.
That's great. Yeah, a true partnership beyond just marketing deals. As you look at the different types of deals in the NIL space, they can certainly vary from but like you mentioned, a car dealership to partnering with a local brand or business, but there's also NIL collectives and executing deals with collectives at a particular school. What advice do you have for student athletes in this space for navigating those different types of contracts? And what have you learned in your experience negotiating or managing a brand deal versus a collective contract?
Yeah, so look, we certainly are not anti-collective at all, right? Our goal is to always work hand in hand with the collective. We understand that for the majority of student athletes, what they get paid from the collective is going to make up the largest portion of what they earn over the course of a year, right? And certainly, when an organization is paying you that much, right, it's not for free, right? You certainly, have obligations to deliver on whatever you deliver, whatever you need to, and whatever you're contracted for. And as an agency, try to stay out of the way. Obviously, when clients allow us to or want us to, negotiate their collective deal and manage it and ensure that all the money is paid on time and everything like that. We're certainly happy to do so. And in that case, maybe we're not, working side by side with the collective and we're actively negotiating against them. But ultimately, the collectives right now, fund the most part of NIL. And so, we would, certainly never stray a kid away from a collective deal, just given how lucrative they are. The pitfalls that we look for when we negotiate a collective deal, it's mostly, are are these collectives signing you for your marketing rights as well? Right? Are you allowing them to go out there and represent you almost like an agency as well? Right? If they are, certainly that is something that we'll push back on. We as our client's agency, we feel like, when we represent one, certainly more beneficial for that one athlete than if we were to represent 15, right? And never really want to be in the marketplace competing against a collective when going after a certain brand deal. And so that is one that we typically look out for. Again, if you're not in a position or don't have a ton of leverage to get that out of your contract, then you might not have a choice, and we certainly understand that. But that is something, at least for our clients, we try to take back from the collective. The other pitfall would be money paid after the transfer portal date, right? Certainly, when you sign a deal with a collective for that year, we're always adamant that, the money gets paid out while you're there, right? For us, like we never want our client to be held hostage at that school over a certain amount of money. So that is always something that we look out for.
Super great insights here. James, last question I had for you. As the athlete is going through the process of due diligence of finding or really getting started with NIL and they're starting to execute their first deal, their second deal, their third deal, is there a certain point in their career as a college student athlete where it's time for them to move forward trying to find an agent? A certain number of deals or another metric that you would recommend?
There's certain parameters that we operate under when we go out and determine whether or not we want to sign a college athlete as an NIL client. Certainly, as an agency with a pretty large professional practice, right? A big part of what we look at is pro potential and whether or not in the next year or two or three, certainly we're not putting a timeline on any kid's career, but whether or not they have an opportunity to make the NBA or the NFL, right? That is certainly something that we look out for. Flipping it over to the student athlete's perspective, it really is how you want to maximize NIL, right? I would say 90% of the money goes to the top 10% of kids. How do you define the top 10%, right? Is it social following? Is it by playing ability? Certainly that matters a lot in terms of media exposure, and also that, affects your social media following heavily as well. If you're not sitting in the 10% and you go out and hire an agent, right, I would then temper expectations on how much money that agent is going to be able to make for you, right? And so to answer that question, no, can't say there's a specific metric. It's really a case by case scenario on whether or not you should hire an agent. Certainly, if you have millions of followers and you're not in a revenue generating sport, it makes sense to hire an agent because there's lots of opportunities outside of kind of endemic brands that invest in NIL available to you. So there's no real, I wouldn't say there's like a real defined metric. It would just be kind of a case by case evaluation, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Great. Well, James, thank you so much for the time, man. Really appreciate the insights with your experience, working as in the agency world in the NIL space for the course of the past couple of years. Appreciate you hopping on and sharing your insights. James Wang from Priority Sports.
Appreciate it, dude.